Summer is here in the Northern Hemisphere and it's the perfect time to get inspired and start capturing amazing photos. So here are some ideas for what to photograph in the coming weeks. One of my favorite things to photograph is lightning. Especially during the warmer summer period, energy builds up in the air and this can produce enormous storms and we can get some amazing lightning images. If the conditions are right, we even get to see these dramatic cloud formations, which also make great photo opportunities. The key for getting these images is to be in the right place before the storm hits. Reading weather data is vital to decide the location. Fortunately, there are a ton of sites available, showing you all the information you need. For my local area here in southern Germany, I use Kachelmannwetter, which even shows me the direction a storm will be heading. This way, I can choose a location and set up the camera before the storm has arrived. For storm photography, I prefer a wide focal length, something between 16 and 24 mm, to include foreground elements and capture vast cloud formations. However, longer lenses can make lightning bolts look more impressive, so don't be afraid to switch it up. Also, it helps tremendously chasing these storms during the darker hours of the day, so the lightning bolts will become more visible on your photos. It's hard to capture them in bright daylight. The most important camera settings for these images is the shutter speed. Lightning is super fast, so you won't be able to push the trigger manually in time to capture lightning. Use longer shutter speeds, somewhere between 1 and 30 seconds, to ensure you don't miss the action. How long of a shutter speed you use is kind of up to your liking. I typically get the best results with a 2 to 7 second exposure. And of course, we want to use a remote, so we don't have to trigger the camera every few seconds ourselves, and we can hide in our car where we are protected from the lightning strikes. Summer months are great for astrophotography. From April to September, the Milky Way is nicely visible in the Northern Hemisphere, while June, July and August offer the best opportunities to capture it. As with storm photography, we are highly dependent on a few conditions. First, obviously we want to have a clear sky without clouds blocking the Milky Way. We also need to make sure to shoot in an area with low light pollution. Capturing the Milky Way from the city center is impossible due to all the other light sources. Being even remotely close to a bigger city will ruin the night sky as well. Try to find the darkest spot near you. Again, thanks to websites freely available, we can easily find those areas. But we also have to make sure there are no natural light sources brightening up the night sky. In other words, don't go out shooting the Milky Way during full moon, because then again we see less stars in the sky during that period. So the best time for Milky Way photography is on a cloudless night during new moon between midnight and 5 AM, when the Milky Way is at its highest above the horizon. Gear-wise, for the classic Milky Way scene, you want to shoot with a wide-angle lens somewhere between 16 and 24 mm. This should be more than enough to get the entire Milky Way in one frame. Again, experimenting with longer lenses is totally fine if you want to focus more on the Milky Way core, for example. More importantly, you want to use a lens with a large aperture to capture more light. Something around f2.8 is a great starting point. If you have a lens with a bigger aperture, that's even better. If not, try raising the ISO as high as possible. Thanks to new AI denoise tools, we can fix a lot of noise problems relatively easily with a bit of editing. Exposure-wise, we are limited depending on the focal length we are using. The wider the lens, the longer the shutter speed we can safely use before running into issues. As an example, let's assume you are shooting with 24 mm and a shutter speed of 30 seconds. Due to Earth's rotation, this will lead to visible star trails or oval stars. To achieve the highest image quality, we want to prevent this effect. As a guideline to find out what shutter speed to use, you can apply the 500 rule. Take 500, divide it by the focal length, and you end up with the shutter speed. So 500 divided by 24 mm would equal a 20.8 second exposure. To be safe, let's round down and use a 20-second exposure. But keep in mind, this is assuming you're shooting with a full frame camera. If working with a crop sensor, then the approach is similar, but instead of 500, take 300 and divide it by the focal length to calculate the shutter speed. While shooting in the mountains can certainly be done in other seasons, during the summer it's less difficult. Most hiking trails will be open, you don't have to think about avalanches, at least on the smaller mountains. Days are longer, so we can go on longer hikes and the temperatures will be much more comfortable. And those are perfect conditions if you're just getting started hiking in the mountains. Once you're on the trail, there is a wide variety of things to shoot. Mountain lakes make a great subject and are rather easy to photograph. You can set up a nice composition by making sure to include a prominent element in the foreground while having the mountains in the back. And to have some nice reflections like this, make sure to visit the mountain lake on days without wind. Preferably early in the morning or late in the evening when the water is calm. Scenes like these are rather wide, so you want to use a wide-angle lens again. I shoot my mountain lake images on a 16mm, which gives me enough room to set up the composition. But you can use longer focal lengths and shoot panorama as well. For truly epic views, mountain ridges are a great subject. Of course, there are more exposed ones which are harder to reach, but there are also plenty of family-friendly, easy to reach ridges, which still look fantastic, especially with the right light conditions during sunrise or sunset. Once more, a wide-angle lens will be your best friend as it allows you to capture a wider scenery with the mountain ridge serving as a great leading line, leading the viewer's eye through the image. The mountains are also the perfect place to make use of your telelens. Zooming in on cloud-covered peaks can get you dramatic looking images. Something like 200mm is totally fine and will get you great results already. For camera settings, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. I suggest using a smaller aperture around f16 for sharp results, but that's highly dependent on the lens you are using. Keep the ISO low to prevent noise issues, but if you need to crank it up, we can fix noise in post. The one thing that will have a greater impact on the outcome is, once more, the shutter speed. Usually I go with shorter shutter speeds and combine them with HDR for crystal clear images. But longer exposures with those smooth looking clouds are awesome as well, so it's really up to you and what you want. If mountains are out of reach, look for nearby fields for stunning photos. Wheat fields during golden hour are beautiful. But on its own, it's not a pleasing composition, it's rather boring. You want to include another element. This could be a tree, some old rusty farm machinery, a wooden barn, or maybe even a person looking towards the sunset. Of course, that's super cheesy, but who really cares when it looks good? Make sure to bring your wide-angle lens again. This way we can build up a nice composition with the wheat texture in the foreground, the subject further away in the distance, and a beautiful sky as a cherry on top. If you're lucky, you'll find a field with hay or wheat bales lying around. These are also great to take pictures of, but act fast before they are taken off the field. Composition-wise, the rule of thirds will be quite helpful for this scenery. Get one of the wheat bales neatly placed in the foreground with the others scattered in the back. Of course, the image will get better exponentially with great light, so be there for golden hour, sunrise or sunset. And again, bring a wide-angle lens. Personally, I love combining these with long exposures of around 2 to 4 minutes to capture the cloud movement. And towards the end of summer, we can also find fields of sunflowers. Sunflowers are another fun subject to shoot with their huge vibrant blossoms. If you come across a field, take a walk along the edge and look for interesting formations, just like this V shape right here. A wide-angle lens, once more, is my go-to lens for images like these. Just keep in mind, if you're rather close to the subject, you might want to focus stack to get sharp results. While spring is my go-to season for flower photography, there are of course plenty around in summer as well. Flowers are a great subject to photograph on a rainy day, as tiny water droplets make them look so much cooler. There are many different ways to capture flowers, with wide, tele or macro lenses, with focus stacking, or with shallow depth of field. A few months back I made a dedicated video to flower photography, so if you want to know more about that topic, I'll add a link to the description of this video. If you're like me and can't stand the heat, a great place to escape it are canyons or waterfalls. Both are also great spots for photography. Early in the morning during the golden hour, you can catch some truly magical light inside of canyons. And if the conditions are right, water spray plus the sunlight will create beautiful sun rays to photograph. It certainly makes sense to cover a wide focal range when visiting canyons. On one hand, to capture the full scenery and the scale of the area, a super wide lens will be vital. But on the other hand, using a tele lens, you can zoom into the canyon, compress it this way and get these classic canyon views. While being near a waterfall helps tremendously to cool down on a warm summer day, I prefer shooting them on rainy or overcast days. The lack of sunlight makes the shadows softer and rain can add a misty look. As those days naturally are darker, we can also make use of longer shutter speeds to capture the motion of the water, and this way get the classic waterfall long exposure. Depending on the size of the waterfall, I usually go somewhere between 1/3 of a second up to 1 second. I want to have this motion blur effect, but I also want to have some detail left in the white water. So not going too crazy with long shutter speeds is vital. If the exposure makes the outcome too bright, try to dial down aperture and ISO. If that won't help, you want to use an ND filter. So I hope this list sparks your creativity and helps you capture amazing summer images. What are your favorite summer photography subjects? Let us know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching this video.